Thank you, members. Member for Cariboo North.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It truly is an honor to rise as the MLA of Cariboo North and to provide my response to the throne speech. Mr. Speaker, food prices are going up. It's hard to find a doctor. We continue to see mental health and addiction challenges. Housing costs continue to rise. People in British Columbia are working harder than ever, but many feel they're just getting by and not getting ahead. People who work hard and play by the rules need someone on their side. Words in this throne speech, I know constituents in my riding are certainly agreeing with. Where it is questionable, Mr. Speaker, is the tagline that this is a government that will have your back and will be there for you. This is a government that regularly picks winners and losers. They like to talk about equity, but this is the height of hypocrisy at its best. And at the losing end of support from this government are the hardworking people living beyond hope, British Columbia. A government quick to pick the pockets of people, all while stating they have your back. An agenda of tax and spend, just not providing services if you don't live in the right area code. Policies being put in place that puts rural and northern communities at a significant disadvantage. Having the highest fuel costs in North America disproportionately impacts ridings like mine in a negative way. It is not like in our communities that we have the same access to transit as maybe some of the other communities. We have significant weather challenges. Yes, we do experience -40 below. So heating fuel is not an option.
Sorry, member, I just was conferring with the clerk. I believe earlier the member might have imputed that the government was doing something illegal. I think the words were pick the pockets. So if she might rephrase, because I don't think that would be within the standing orders.
That the government continues to tax regularly MLAs, and I would say that the constituents in Cariboo North feel that they've got a little less money in their pockets.
Thank you, member.
I would certainly have to say that. So, thank you. As I would say, Mr. Speaker, we have recently experienced -40 below, and for people trying to heat their homes, I've certainly heard from many people in my constituency that heating fuel is not an option, but it is a necessity. And I know that people in my riding have just recently received their most recent heating bills, and between the layering of taxes, the delivery fees, this is an extraordinarily challenging time for constituents in my riding. And so they do want a government that has their back, and they do want a government that understands the unique challenges that many British Columbians are facing. I've especially heard from seniors right now that are struggling. We have from this NDP government in this throne speech a government that takes victory laps over and over and over again. A government talking about the same priorities for the 6th year in a row, but the results just keep getting worse. A government's approach of the cumulative layering of 20 new and/or increased taxes, again, folks in the Cariboo don't feel like they're getting more money in their pockets. Legislation that creates an uncertain business climate that is consistently driving investment elsewhere, government decisions that are resulting in an exodus of highly skilled workers to Alberta and other jurisdictions, healthcare workers that certainly under this government do not feel that this is a government that has their back, and when people are struggling the most, when the exhaustion and the frustration is at its pinnacle, the NDP government resorts to repeating victory laps, press releases, and statements, even today in this legislature, on what a great job they're doing and how everything is great when it comes to healthcare. And I can tell you this is putting a mental strain on the very people this government should be there for. NDP is doubling the total provincial debt per person by 2024 to more than $16,500 for every man, woman, and child. A legacy our children and our grandchildren will inherit. A legacy that's not okay. The riding of Caribou North, Mr. Speaker, is larger than Vancouver Island. And I'm proud to be the fourth generation raised in this spectacular part of the province. Our riding is proud of our entrepreneurial spirit, its rich natural resource sectors that provide good paying, family supporting jobs. The people of my riding are resilient. They take care of their neighbors and their community. They pay their taxes. They do not ask for a lot from government, but they do hope. They hope that a loved one gets sick, that they'll be able to access health care. And this throne speech had no plan to address the crisis in our healthcare system. Just today, I heard from one of my constituents named Blaine. Blaine is a young guy who owns a business in our community, and he has had recently 3 strokes. And he's had an impossible time finding a family doctor, like so many British Columbians across this province. And he told me that he went to the walk-in clinic and there is a sign on the door stating that it's permanently closed. Then he called the urgent primary care on Monday and was told that there won't be a doctor there until Saturday. So how does this explain the response that we repeatedly hear from this government, that everything is great, that there is access for everyone in healthcare, we've got these great centers that are open across British Columbia, just not in our communities? And the people of the Caribou are frustrated. They're angry. Another constituent, Tim, contacted my office recently. Tim was diagnosed with cancer and started receiving treatments in May of 2022. His oncologist went on holidays in December and will not be back until March of 2023. So this has left him without an oncologist at a very difficult time. So they've sent in their provincial work to their paperwork to the Provincial Health Authority, and now Tim has to travel to Kelowna from Quesnel to see an oncologist. Is that good enough? You know, I also learned when, the Minister of Health talked today about how great this government is doing around diagnostic imaging and how everything is working great, record opportunities for meeting the healthcare needs of British Columbia as well. I learned some pretty tragic news over the holidays. 3 separate incidences of people in my community who've been trying to access health care. They don't have a family doctor, and now have received absolutely terrible, life-altering news that they have late-stage cancer and now it's terminal. This is simply not good enough. And this throne speech did nothing to address the crisis that our communities are facing. Why does the North not have a PET scan for cancer diagnosis? Why is Northern Health the only health authority without a cardiac unit? Why is it that people of the North have to travel down to the Lower Mainland at their own expense to make sure that they access health care with all the revenues that come out of the North? Why do we not have access to the same kind of services that other health authorities have? Government's quick to tax and take money from people living in the Caribou, money from the natural resource sector, all while they keep changing the goalposts for these sectors, creates uncertainty, eroding any competitive advantage that we may have once had. Look, I would remind members of the House that these are good-paying, family-supporting jobs. And we're seeing an erosion in rural British Columbia of these foundational sectors that have helped build this province. Where is the equity from this NDP government for people living north of Hope? Where is the support for the families and individuals trying to access treatment and recovery support for their loved ones that may suffer from mental health or addiction diseases? How can a government continue to brag about how much progress they're making when there's such a limited level of support for people living in rural and northern British Columbia? Look, I've had to sit with the families as they desperately, many have mortgaged their multiple mortgages on their houses as they desperately try and seek treatment for people that they love. It shouldn't happen in a province like British Columbia. Wait lists, months, if you can even get access to treatment, and it's not good enough. No one can look around and say that the current approach taken by this government is working. But look, I want to contrast this for a moment and say that on this side of the House, we feel that better is possible. I'm proud that our party has put forward a plan to overhaul the delivery of mental health services and to build a recovery-oriented system of care for those suffering from addiction. We would eliminate user fees. We would build regional recovery communities, and that includes in the north. The status quo is not working, and doing more of the same is not going to drive better results for anyone. One of the other things that this side of the House has put forward, and I think it's important, as the opposition, we hold the government to account, but we also put forward really thoughtful, compassionate ideas that we know can make a real difference in the lives of British Columbians. Look, we endorse the plan proposed by Dr. Julian Summers and Simon Fraser University in July 2021, providing an effective roadmap to address street homelessness with a focus on evidence-based services, partnerships with Indigenous organizations, and highly effective model of person-centered services. That's leadership. Those are steps that we've put forward to this government. We also believe on this side of the House that it's critically important to look at awareness and prevention. Creating and delivering youth-focused public education campaigns about addiction and recovery, and establish workplace campaigns to assist employers in recognizing substance use disorders and better supporting employees in recovery is the right thing to do. We believe in creating programs to support families struggling with addiction recovery system navigation and having general questions and supports for impacted family members. We feel that this is leadership. We also understand very clearly that there needs to be established detailed data systems to track province-wide performance measures and targets with clear benchmarks, the number of publicly funded mental health and addiction treatment beds available to British Columbia, that this will measure performance outcomes and ensure standardization of care. This is leadership, something that this throne speech is desperately lacking. This throne speech mentioned very little about the natural resource sector. It did say that the mining sector is booming in British Columbia. Well, again, in the riding of Cariboo North, there is so much opportunity when it comes to mining. What the speech does not outline, the throne speech, is how terrible this government is on actually getting permits out the door. You know, I recently talked to Ross, a placer miner, who's waited 18 months to get his permit through. How, as a small business owner, are you supposed to be able to support yourself and pay the taxes and do all the things that are necessary if it actually takes you 18 months to get a permit? And look, I would remind the members of this House that we have limited ability to actually work because of our weather. So there are critical points in the Cariboo where work absolutely needs to be, completed. And so when you're seeing permits that get moved long into the summer when critical work needs to happen, that has an impact on small business owners in our community. And there are some large mine projects that we feel are huge opportunities, not just for people living in our region, our Indigenous First Nations communities, but in fact for all of British Columbia, because quite frankly, we need these jobs. The Cariboo is one of the most forest-dependent regions in North America. And under the NDP government, since 2019, I think we've experienced 29 indefinite curtailment of mills. First, this government said in 2017 election, I remember that day when the Premier stood up and said, first order of business is I will go down to Washington and I will deliver the softwood lumber deal for British Columbia. I can make that happen. Under an NDP government, we wouldn't see mills closed because we've got people's backs. We've got workers' backs. Well, look. Every single time that there's a curtailment or challenges in our rural communities, the government comes forward with this press release, we've got your back, we'll be there for you. Where's the support for the logging contractors? Logging contractors like Blaine, that was mentioned earlier today in question period, business owners can have pieces of equipment that range from $600,000 to $1 million+. They cannot afford to operate under this legislative and economic model that consistently creates uncertainty, where the goalposts consistently change, and when they have a government that treats them as their own personal, I'll probably get in trouble here, piggy bank, as they find new ways to taxes such as the employer health tax. This budget did mention the importance of the movement of goods and services across the province, and we certainly felt the impacts when there are significant climate events that challenges the transportation network in British Columbia. Well, I would like to take a moment to invite all members of this House, specifically the Minister of Transportation, to come and travel to the Cariboo. Over the past few years, one year we saw 150 roads impacted, the next 200 different roads that have been significantly impacted. Where is the investment that is critical to make sure that the transportation network remains viable? I'd like to invite members of this legislature to come and drive with me across the potholes that exist on the Quesnel River Bridge and rail overpass. The damage that is currently on that bridge is no longer a matter of just damage to vehicles. I'm raising in this legislature today that it's a public safety concern, and I fear that there will be an accident on that bridge one day because of the significant damage and the collapsing nature of the pavement on that bridge that's going to cost somebody their lives. This government came in a few years ago and said, look, we're going to have shovels in the ground. And yet we continue to wait. Another press release by this government with no results. Another important bridge that I want to raise in this House is the Johnson Street Bridge. So this is the backup bridge to the Quesnel River Bridge if something ever happens. And again, I know that the government thinks that this is a piece of infrastructure that's just for Quesnel and their residents. I would remind this House that Quesnel Bridge, River Bridge, is a critical piece of the movement of goods and services to the north. If something happens with that bridge and that bridge goes down or is impacted or is closed, it stops the movement of goods and services to the north. UNBC did a study, I think it was last year, that talked about that any closure of Highway 97 up to the north means we've got about 4 days worth of food in our grocery stores. So it is a significant concern that we should all be paying attention to. So what is the backup if something happens with the Quesnel River Bridge? and the overpass. Well, the backup is the Johnson Street Bridge, which for residents living in the community of Quesnel and the province, the responsibility of that bridge, yes, it's a municipal bridge, but I would say it is time now, with such a critical piece of infrastructure that connects the north, the movement of goods and services, that it's time that this government comes to the table and provides the support for the improvements that are necessary on Johnson Street Bridge. Because of the restrictions that are currently on the Johnson Street Bridge, it means that industrial traffic have to go currently on Maple Drive, which means that you can have up to 80 industrial vehicles going to a plywood plant that goes by a middle school, a daycare, an elementary school. You've got kids that are walking with very narrow sidewalks and industrial traffic. And again, I'm raising this legislature that I'm really concerned that we could have a serious accident, and this government needs to come to the table and work with our local government. This throne speech, I will say, talked about the importance of working with local government. I came from local government, as many members of this legislature did, and I profound respect for the work that is being done by local governments, regional districts right across this province. But support for resource-based communities that are being hit is significantly important right now, because when a mill closes in a community like mine or a community, I could go through lists of where we've seen significant challenges. That local government is significantly challenged by trying to replace that tax base, and it has very real consequences on people. So I encourage the government to reach out and work with local governments on that. The throne speech did mention that they have a plan for high-speed internet to every community across the province. I think this is critically important. I would remind members of this House that the Auditor General released a report that highlighted that 60% of rural remote communities do not have basic connectivity. And that puts us in rural and northern communities at a significant disadvantage. And I really hope that what was put in this throne speech becomes a reality, that the NDP actually delivers real results and outcomes on this front, and not just more press releases. I want to spend a few minutes talking about training. Of course, I am extraordinarily proud to serve as the Shadow Minister for Post-Secondary Education. We all know how critically important it is to the economic, social health of the province of British Columbia that we make sure we get that right. I want to raise that the huge opportunity, and I see my Shadow Minister of Agriculture is here, that the vet school at UNBC is a critical piece that, while it didn't make it into the throne speech, it is certainly my hope that it'll find its way into the budget, because we certainly know how critically important that program is for all of British Columbia. Another critical piece of investment that some training that we've seen cut, and I hope that this government finds a path forward. It is really discouraging that in the Minister of Post-Secondary's education own backyard that we're seeing the sign language interpretive program being cut. I think that does not speak well for a government that talks about accessibility and making sure that they're focused on inclusion, when the Minister of Post-Secondary Education's in her own riding the program that was the only program in Western Canada is now being cut, and I think that's not good enough, and I think that the minister needs to step up and provide some leadership on that. Some of the other opportunities, we had the opportunity each year, MLAs in the north have the opportunity to meet with all of our school board trustees, and I think that's a really important piece, because we get together and, it's those opportunities where it's, partisanship is not, it's parked at the door, and we just talk about how we can really make a difference around education in our communities. And one of the things that consistently comes out year after year is the challenges that northern communities, and not just in education and healthcare, but in fact, all sectors, the challenge it is around recruitment and retention in our communities. It is a significant challenge. I believe and I know for sure that when we can invest in training in our communities, that is a critical piece in helping us retain professionals in rural and northern communities. And so it is my hope, while it certainly we didn't see much in the throne speech, I am hopeful in the budget that we will see an opportunity to provide real training in communities right across the province, but specifically in those communities that are struggling with recruitment and retention, because it's hard. It's hard to attract critical needed professionals in our communities. I guess perhaps just maybe in closing, I just want to say I am truly grateful for having such extraordinary staff and support, both in my constituency office back home and here in the legislative precinct. Boy, we are all blessed to have some extraordinary people, and sometimes we forget, as the politics rage sometimes here, how important that these people are. And I just want to sincerely say thank you for all of the help and the assistance that you provide. And I know that constituents are extraordinarily well served coming into my constituency office. We lead from our heart. Many days there's a lot of tears that are shared. And it's a difficult job working in our constituency offices, and I certainly acknowledge and know that. And I just want to say thank you to my team and my staff. I also want to thank all of the people, the stakeholders that have consistently stepped up and have provided so much support, especially the students. Please know how much your thoughtful, enthusiastic support ideas mean. Often in this place, it's pretty negative, and that's the nature of sometimes this business. And I am an optimist, and so having the opportunity to meet with students who have lots of great ideas, I again want to say thank you for that. And finally, I've got some incredible mentors to the Indigenous elders that are always there to provide support. I really do appreciate that. In closing, to our knowledge keepers and our elders right across our communities in the province, thank you. This province is a fantastic place to live, and we are very blessed. And I'm reminded and grateful every single day that there's some extraordinary people that work hard every day. And in closing, please don't forget about rural and northern BC. I know that we sometimes we're a long way from Victoria, and it certainly feels like that. And I know my constituents feel forgotten, and they're frustrated, and they're worried, like all British Columbians, and it just sometimes seems just a little bit harder to access services of government in our communities. And so I will continue to be an advocate for our rural communities. And with that, Honourable Speaker, I close my remarks.
Thank you, Member